the 29th of, double check that one, 29th of March 2022. Welcome everybody, I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. I'm available all the time. 709-589-4406. You are at war. Whether you understand it, accept it, doesn't matter. You are at war. The nuclear industry has engaged you in a life and death struggle.
For the first time, potentially fatal levels of radiation have been discovered outside the crippled nuclear plant, raising concerns. For the first time, potentially fatal levels of radiation have been discovered outside.
This is March the 12th. No, there's nothing off-site, Dana. Everything's contained. Misleading post claims Fukushima nuclear plant is on fire. We're going to cover the sadistic news cycle for the last 24 hours. Misleading post claims Fukushima nuclear plant on fire. Here's another misleading post. They're all going to claim they're in the fuel pool at the top of a building that don't actually exist.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be Reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
I put that together about 7 years ago. I should re-update it, I think, at this stage. But how do you tell that story better? That's just 4 major medias out of thousands that regurgitated that narrative, pretended that the fuel pool existed when it didn't at a nuclear power plant. The whole world's like, that's great, Dana, have a nice day. Hello, Tokyo. Japanese operators said although a fire alarm went off on March the 16th, this month, no fire or smoke was detected, so leave us alone, we're the nuclear industry. This is an interesting picture. I don't really see that angle very much in the last 11 years. The Post shares 2 images unrelated to the recent earthquake. One shows a Japanese oil refinery following an earthquake. It's this picture here. This caused an uproar, and AFP had to come out and debunk it. It says, breaking news, Japanese Fukushima nuclear power plant swept up in a red blaze. This is South Korean. Reads the South Korean language text on a graphic shared here on Facebook on March the 24th, 2022. Just a few days ago. If you do not want to die, you must escape. Emergency evacuation orders issued in Fukushima. The graphics was shared online after a powerful 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Japan's Fukushima. It was 45 miles away from Fukushima, about 45 miles deep. The first place it had to hit was Fukushima, but it done $5.5 billion worth of damage, but no damage to the fragile buildings. The quake cut power in at least 2 million homes. It's 3 million. and set off a tsunami advisory, which wasn't necessary, and they knew it. When it drops the continental shelf, right, it displaces the water, and a tsunami will happen. And because they have a record with this now, they know almost exactly how long it takes to get there at 450 miles per hour. AFP reported. AFP is a big media. Now, we're worried about 2 reactors in particular, but 4 altogether, and likely 2 others. A common spin fuel pool in Reactor 6 we're also worried about denigrating and falling apart. So there's the remains of Reactor 3. Ignore this one, they're pretending it looks like that, but it actually looks like that over there. It actually looks like that over there. Hang on. The problem with these stories is every single story is complicated. Because they pretend it looks like that, but it doesn't. It makes it complicated. When you're trying to do something good on this wonderful only planet that we got. You can go live on Mars all you want, but what have I got done? Don't click stuff, Dana. You're confusing everybody. I got no idea. Just not. You got to do that to make that work, do I? Can I make that work? There we go. That looks better to me. It's pretty amazing that they're claiming they're on a building that don't even exist. Now, they've done the same thing for Reactor 3. That's them pretending they're on top of. And that's me, you see there. That's actually what the building looks like. Blew up and caught fire, blew up and blew up and caught fire. Not necessarily in that order. Okay. Now, the problem with this story is the building is destroyed, and to your above me is the fuel pools. You see these there, blah blah blah. They're the actual fuel pools, right there, and that one over there. So the building looks like this. The fuel pools would be about 100 plus feet above the wreckage, and another 20, 30 feet would be the roof of the reactor. That would have been Reactor 4. So they're pretending that it looks like this. And they've done the same thing now for Reactor 3 last year for the anniversary. They said, oh, we got all the fuel out of it. Nuclear, good. Dana, bad. I'll play that clip again for you because this don't get old.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
So, to the people that voted no, bless your hearts, on my poll that I'm going to bring up at some point. Oh, it's over there. Stop touching stuff, Dana. Okay, so 85% to 20 votes says I asked the question, can nuclear survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags? And 3 degenerate scumbags says yes, they can. And the best people on the planet, 85%, said no. But those 3 people that voted that, then I got a question for you. Hopefully you'll entertain me. Just told me, stop doing that. I'm sorry. Okay, so the people that voted no, do they really think that she's on top of that building there? Or that these people are on top of that nuclear meltdown there? Now, they never tried to do this in Chernobyl, by the way, or 3 Mile Island, or Santa Susana, or Sellafield, United Kingdom, or the SL1 in the United States, or the one that melted down in Sweden. Anyway, let's keep it rolling here. I guess that's not going to work. That means I got to go back there. However, the claim that a fire broke out at the nuclear power plant is misleading. Well, actually not, because the buildings are very fragile and the fire could have broke out, and there always is emissions. You just need the right conditions to see it. And here's what it looks like. We got lots of models. And we got academic studies showing it falling out in heartbreaking quantities. So this is a 16-day model from France where it covers the entire planet. That's an accurate model, but the model is only based on venting. It's not based on the actual destroyed buildings I showed you and the inventories that they had in them, which was 40 years worth of reactor cores are gone in each of the buildings. Now there's 2 more buildings with those same attributes. We suspect the common spent fuel pool has those same attributes, and that being that it's destroyed and the inventory is gone and released, circling the planet, destroying life, and also Reactor 6. And we invoked the common spent fuel pool in Reactor 6 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan, because last year they released 736 pictures that were taken from a drone. And when you zoomed in, you realized all the buildings that I name are redacted. We've never seen that before, with no explanations. Which begs the question, why did you release it if you're going to redact everything? When you've never done anything like that before. Were they trying to warn us? However, the claim that a fire broke out is probably accurate. TEPCO, which operates the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and you should treat it as probability because your life depends on it, issued a statement saying the 2 fire alarms went off at a plant shortly because of the radioactive fallout. A fire alarm went off at the plant because if you have an earthquake, your fire alarm doesn't go off unless there's smoke, because that's what makes a fire alarm go off. But an investigation found there was no fire or smoke. And just for evidence, you're going to like this one, a local fire department in the nuclear wasteland. Hey, you guys busy over there in Kuma? Or Fudabar? No, we're sitting around. Still got nobody living here. Got our fire trucks all cleaned up, though. Never got dirty yet. Don't tell me they got a fire. They were like saying the local fire department in Fukushima concluded they were false alarms. Whoever wrote that story should have all their hair pulled out of their head. AFP has previously debunked misinformation spreading about the Fukushima nuclear power plant here and here. They had links. So I went to the links, which, look what we find there. Photo shows nuclear waste pollution from Japan, but that was false, yeah? Now there is real maps of the pollution covering the ocean. That one's from NOAA. So there's real ones from NOAA. It's this one right here. The nuclear industry has been shoving that one down everybody's throat, hoping people will bite on it. They're a vicious bunch. Now remember, in 16 days, the radiation plume covered the entire planet. That's important for the rest of the night because we've got a lot of news to get through. It's only early. Don't want you to be confused like they're doing to you. Photo shows the forecast of the tsunami path in Japan. AFP Fact Checked, and AFP is huge, after 2011 earthquake. So I went there and found a story, blah, 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 blah. This was from April 2021, last year, less than a year ago. So the post shares the image as false context. In reality, the image shows a forecast by the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, known as NOAA, for a tsunami in March 2011 after an earthquake struck Japan, Tohoku region. It is captioned Japan's nuclear wastewater alert to all around the world. The shameful Japanese government will soon dump the Fukushima nuclear wastewater into the Pacific. See what they done there? This will be biggest man-made environmental catastrophe of the century. So there's people waking up, and this is the information you got to work with because you can't find me. The truth, I should say. And drunk swordsmen. This is probably them doing it by rights. AFP Fact Checker. Now, there was a story came out to ask the question, what illness of the mind must people have to lie about the threat? So this is lying about the threat, AFP Fact Checker. Because NOAA had the tsunami map and the radioactive ocean. This is NOAA's too. But NOAA also has aerosol dispersal of cesium-137 and iodine-131. This model is based on 40 days. I'm going to speed it up to double that number. Now it's going twice the speed. But still a 40-day model. When it stops, that's the end of 40 days. Of course, the radiation doesn't just fall out of the sky and say, have a nice day. It continues doing that until you can't see the planet anymore. They didn't want to show you that one. They didn't want to show you the one that actually for the ocean. They wanted to feed you that one and come out with this story and make you feel stupid. So you go away and give up. But actually that model there was a model that came out from a Germany institute.
Maybe worse than thought.
2013.
Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
Just 6 years. Okay, the photo was shared alongside a similar claim on Chinese microblogging website Weibo, and they got links to there, and Facebook and Twitter where it was shared. And the claim is false. The photo is unrelated to the nuclear waste pollution. This is a model that's well known based on TEPCO's numbers of plutonium-239 dispersals. You know, that's the Pacific right there and the Atlantic Ocean right here, Europe. It covers the whole planet. According to the NOAA, the National Ocean, the graphics displayed forecast results showing tsunami. Okay. Now, there was models out there of the airborne dispersals from all the major institutions, including NOAA. There's tons and tons of models of the radioactive fallout. This one based on 20-day radioactive fallout. So this is the part that cracks me up even worse, is that in response to the misleading post, a NOAA spokesperson told AFP Fact Checker in an email April the 16th, 2020, a year before that happened, the spokesman said, obviously the tweet greatly mischaracterized the Tohoku tsunami map. The map is a plot of the maximum wave amplitude from the Tohoku tsunami. So instead of saying, well, we got an ocean map, here it is, to send the line with you. But don't worry about the ocean because it was airborne. And it fell out of the sky in 40 days, covered everything anyway. Right? What they decided to do was just perpetrate the lie. So 14 prefectures, half of Japan, 55 countries barred the food for a decade, and then the nuclear industry got people in positions of authority and slowly changed each country. Now there's only 10. Canada gave up the goose after 93 days. Canada's like, nobody else takes it, ship it over here. People love cancer and heart problems and liver problems over here too. So don't eat the food from Japan, because they're actually shipping lots of it to other prefectures, relabeling it and shipping it into your countries. In fact, they should have a model of where all the food's being shipped to. I'd like to see that model. I mean, that's scary right there. But you can imagine what the model of where all the food's been going, almost £1 billion a year shipped out of that country from there. See, people think it's just Fukushima, but it's infinitely... Well, Tokyo should be banned too. Holy crap. 1,000 years from now, the contaminated water from Fukushima may be still entering the ocean. Think about this headline here. We may not be able to live in Japan someday because you had stupid enough to have a nuclear power plant. It's not your fault, even though it's your responsibility to keep an eye on these monsters. We allegedly had checks and balances, but they were captured by the industry, same as their universities and medias. And now we got to take it all back or lose it. Japan Prime Minister tells ministers to craft an economic package as prices skyrocket. Almost $1 trillion US because of the war going on in, well, not a war, it is, I don't know what it is. If Putin wanted to walk through that country, they could. I mean, look what they've done to Syria and Afghanistan. We'll focus on 4 areas: higher crude oil prices, stable food supplies, funding support for small, mid-sized companies, and assistance to people in need. They're addicted to the money after the last 2 years is what it is. $881 billion budget, a record for the next 12 months. The trigger clause was frozen to secure tax revenue for use in reconstruction in the aftermath of the 2011 earthquake and tsunami that triggered the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. They can't just come out and say it's worse than Chernobyl. I think in the last decade we got 2 examples of where they actually did say it was worse than Chernobyl, but I shudder to think how many headlines we cover each year. It's absurd anyway. It's more than anybody else on this planet, a bit. Triggered the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. Well, actually, I know it is. Anything? No, there is nobody does a dedicated nuclear show on the planet, period, right? And I've been doing it for years and years and years. They can't compete against me. They're going to get pounded if they do at this stage, right? We got lots of people that are educated now. Anything is better than energy from coal. says Long here in Alberta, Canada. Even nuclear power, says the little lapdog. No, coal is 10 times better. Just don't put it in your community, stupid. Coal doesn't make plumes that covers the planet. Oil doesn't make plumes that cover the planet. Gas doesn't make plumes that cover the planet, all right? And the only thing that does that is nuclear. And nuclear's plumes pulses energy every second, almost at the speed of light. You got any idea what that does to your autoimmune triggers? I'm not going to bother drilling you today, but I usually do. Darlington Nuclear Power Plant. Is that the Darlington? Yeah, I think that's the story. Yeah, that is the Darlington Nuclear Power Plant. The specter of nuclear Armageddon has hung over our civilization for decades. Yeah, but I mean, like the Americans, Joe Biden can set off nuclear weapons. He don't need another guy. That's crazy. Uranium builds steam. Canadian provinces announce nuclear energy plan. Canada was captured by the nuclear industry apparently quite a while ago. And so when Fukushima happened, after 93 days, Canada said to Japan, just ship it to us. We don't need no papers. I'm not kidding you. Canada is now full of nothing but diseases. They destroyed the whole country in 11 years. It's unbelievable that they done that. That's the nuclear industry. It's heartless, eh? They're trying to build it, and they will. They'll get their way because they got no resistance whatsoever. We're the closest there is to resistance out there. And I've been boxed in. I don't even actually exist, I don't think, do I? What have I got here? 26 people on my show? That means it doesn't exist, right? That means it doesn't exist. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Lucid. Just tell people I hope you get your, go ahead and get your booster. There are people out there that I'll probably say that to them. Hi, everybody. There's Timber Traveler. I was talking to Timber Traveler today. Vancouver Island. No, you shouldn't be living in Japan right now, is right, James. We got 27 votes. 89% says, can nuclear survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags? The right answer, obviously, is no. Like, each one of these shows clearly shows what I'm saying, suggesting in the poll is true. Anybody knows anything would know it's true. We don't call it the Scumbag Show because I got bored or was picking names out of a hat. I mean, that's the name, right? The Nuclear Scumbag Show. It's a nuclear... They're revolting. The whole industry is just insidiously revolting. Let's get it going here. Canadian provinces announce they're going... Well, 4 provinces. I mean, they don't even have a small modular reactor. They got one out of 100 companies looking at it that has passed the regulatory peak. They're like, yeah, we'll rubber stamp it for now. Get you to the next stage. Really, you think really, does the nuclear industry really think the Canadians are going to be slipped like again? Ontario, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and Alberta released a nuclear energy plan Monday. This is seeking alpha. Everything there should be dipped in tar and fettered and driven out of the civilization. The provinces hope to build several small-scale nuclear reactors. They hope. See, they won't take that enthusiasm and have pumped hydro for storage for renewables, or compressed air storage for renewables, or something like that, or geothermal or tidal power or something like that. They won't spend a nickel on it. No, they'll give them whatever they want for their beloved nuclear. Otherwise, they won't get reelected, or they won't have a job in the near future. See, they don't want to do it. They got no choice. Nuclear industry got them by the spleen, and there is no small modular reactors, right? That small modular reactor narrative kind of disappeared for the last year and a half because we beat the shit out of it for about 5 years straight. Curb stomped everybody that mentioned the word small modular reactors in the context of we just humiliated their version that is really, it's going to take you 10 years to build it. Even if you get it right, you got to get the kinks out of it. We're talking about the nuclear industry on top of that. You can get the kinks out of it, that's 20 years. Now you got to build another one based upon the new design. You got to procure all the precious resources and metals that the planet got left that's not being gouged by scumbag NASA. And you got a lot of nuclear industries to compete with, scrounging for the same precious metals. Okay, so if you do get it up and running, that's 30, 35, 40, 45 years down the road. Last year, there was 291 gigawatts of renewables came online in 12 months. The year before was 260 gigawatts, which you're looking at 600 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online permanently for the next 40 or 50 years. That 1/10 of the price on top of that. And so by 2024 to 2025, there's going to be around 4,800 new gigawatt online, which is more power than all fossil plants on the planet combined and nuclear combined currently. And the small modular reactors they're talking about, the only way they're going to work is if you use mixed oxide fuel, where you're reclaiming uranium plutonium. You're not really reclaiming it. You're taking it and you're gonna try to slowly release it into the environment. Once the reactor stops its lifespan, by the way, you're talking about mixed oxide fuel, used fuel left over that's still splitting the atom. It has to sit in pools for about 140 years, and it boils the pools away all day long. Each liter is saturated with isotopes because it's still splitting the atom. The atom's got to go somewhere. And you got over 1,000 fuel pools on the planet hemorrhaging radiation 24/7 on a scale that, if you could see radiation, it'd be the animosity equivalent of a snowstorm. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Think about this. If you had a snowstorm that didn't stop. Imagine you had a snowstorm. It doesn't stop and it doesn't melt. Now take that and just shift it over to uranium. I'm sorry, but a snowstorm that covers the planet. Well, let's say the snowstorm stops every 2 weeks and then starts up again in 3 months. But the snow doesn't melt. At what point are you going to be living on the top of a mountain? Because that's what radiation does, right? It's constantly emitted, but it doesn't go away. Do you got any idea how much danger the 8 million species are in and the humans? How late this is, how far down the hole we actually are. Don't worry, I'll tell you 500 more times before 2022 is out, hopefully. It's a good year. I'll tell you a lot more than that. The government of Ontario, Saskatchewan, government, the nuclear industry, of Ontario, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and Alberta released a nuclear energy plan in order to keep their jobs. The province hopes to build several small-scale nuclear reactors. You're going to start in 2028. Just give us all the money now. With 2 in New Brunswick by 2030 and 1 in Saskatchewan. And Saskatchewan mines a lot of uranium, so there's nothing they won't act with yes to. They got a rubber stamp for anything in the nuclear industry. It's all nonsense. It's 100% propaganda. Just trying to rob the country again. Nobody wants to see the country survive. Everybody's trying to kill this country. And every country. Though nuclear energy is affordable and carbon-free, says the lunatics, which is actually the most carbon-intensive thing in human history. You can't even turn it on without an external power plant, 2 of them, and unburdened by intermittency. So you're taking a crack at wind and solar, that if you use compressed air storage, like the only way you can use renewables is you got to have wind and solar, is backed up by geothermal and tidal, it is backed up by compressed air and pumped hydro. So compressed air, you dig mine shafts and compress air down there from excess energy. And with pumped hydro, you do the same thing, excess energy. You store it in compressed air tunnels or pumped hydro. You can recirculate the water, so you got for peak power. And you can have heavy mineralated water with heavy minerals in it, so water is actually heavier by volume. And just recirculate it for peak power for 6 hours. They actually do that in the United Kingdom, by the way. And unburdened by intermittency. Right? Because they can solve it. If I can figure it out, they can figure it out. John Gorman, president of the Canadian Nuclear Association, right? Who's obviously he would have had a hand in Japan shipping food and poisoning all of Canada too, see? And everybody around him would have. They would have been at the top of that list of the people who made this happen to poison all the Canadians. It's important to note, spent fuel has never hurt anyone, says the lunatic. Every spent fuel pool is hemorrhaging radiation. Hang on, because I don't like liars, and unfortunately that's what nuclear is. Nuclear can't open its eyes in the morning without lying. Well, first off, you can't say spent fuel pool never hurt anybody, John. The spent fuel from that definitely hurt people, John. The fuel pools don't exist. You can't say they never hurt anyway. But these spent fuel pools in every reactor worldwide, there's 2 spent fuel pools. There's no repositories. There's decades of reactor cores there. All of it splitting the atom. And this is what it would look like if you took the 1,000 pools worldwide and put them all into one spot. All day long, this plume would exist just from the fuel pools worldwide. I'm sure it would be worse. Because that model is only based on venting. It's not based on actual inventories of destroyed reactors like that one there, which is Reactor 4, Reactor 3, and Reactor 2, and Reactor 1. All lost the same inventories. Dear John, the president of the Canadian Nuclear Association. This is what I mean, right? Can the nuclear industry survive without scumbags like John? Can nuclear survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags like John? That'll be the poll tomorrow night, I guess. Adding that uranium is about 1 million times more energy dense than coal. Yeah, and you got to go through what, 1 million pounds to get the amount he's going to be talking about? The amount of uranium it would take to power an entire lives, transportation, homes, everything would fit in the Coke bottle. And if every person on the planet touched the Coke bottle when they put it in there, you would kill everybody on the planet. And if every animal on the planet walked past it, they would die too, if you actually had that stuff sitting there. And that the atoms releases, if you took a half the Coke bottle that he's talking about, and brought it into the most busiest McDonald's on the planet. It'd kill everybody in there in 20 minutes. It'd do that for millions of years. Not only that, it's splitting the atom at a ferocious rate. You got no idea what evil is till you look at nuclear. Last week, Boris Johnson. Really going to use Boris Johnson as some litany? Promised nuclear energy would return to 25% in the United States. Boris can't even tie his own shoes. That's a sin to put him in there with the professional lawyers like John. Perhaps more importantly, your proposed nuclear energy is to be defined as sustainable. France, the European Union, right, has a presidency of 6 months or whatever it is. France waited until France came into power midnight on New Year's and then issued that statement there. They deferred it for a whole year because, I mean, common sense tells you this is ludicrous to suggest that it has any attributes whatsoever as sustainable. If you're a human, seeking alphas is not exactly known to be human-type peoples. The Sprout Uranium Trust, that sprung out of nowhere, ended up on the stock market and bought all the physical uranium last year in Canada. Artificially inflated the price of raw uranium, and then they suckered a lot of investors and pensioners into investing money in the uranium bear market that didn't exist. They've been doing this for 11 years. But I thought what Sprout done last year was the ultimate despicable thing. And it actually worked. The price did stay high, but now it's falling. The war artificially just inflated the uranium, saved it for another month or two. It flatlined after Fukushima. Everybody that's working the Sprout Uranium, that's insiders, should obviously be arrested for what they done. It's 100% criminal. They're just robbing pensioners is what they're up to. What is potassium iodine and why is it so hard to find right now? Probably got nothing to do with all the fear-mongering we've been listening to for that Russia's going to attack America. Limit the absorption of radiation in the thyroid gland. Yeah, that's only true if you got a single plume coming through. If you're going to live and breathe in the environment, you can't avoid it. It sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. Not just your thyroid, but your thyroid takes the radiation originally, the atoms, and converts it into radioactive hormones. So if you fill your thyroid gland up with artificial iodine, in a certain scenario, you can stop that. And that's really important. Like, that's hugely important that you protect your hormones production. But it ends up in all your other glands too. Radiation is so insidious, the U.S. government describes it as 1 billion times more toxic than industrial poison because of the way long-term effect of it. They got more studies on radiation than anything else on the planet on top of that. Let's keep it rolling here. Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Add to that threat of radioactive fallout from accidental intentional attacks on Ukraine's nuclear plants. And no wonder that many people are increasingly on edge. Thyroid safe potassium iodine tablets, because you can really hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing. They all come with instructions. You got to make sure you don't have any pre-existing conditions that you should worry about. There's a lot of attributes you're have to take into consideration. The best thing to do is get rid of nuclear before it happens. From Ukraine to India, reminders of the urgent need to work towards a denuclearized world. From Ukraine to India. The journey from nuclear power to denuclearization requires us to be cognizant of the horrors of radioactive life in which breathing itself is undemocratic. Who the hell wrote that? Oh, yeah. North Korea government remains in place and relatively unmolested precisely because of its weapons. No, that's not true. It's over 70 years of isolations. They needed a boogeyman. That's why they're left like they are. Yet a denuclearized world would still be a safer world, indeed. After all, would Putin have behaved the way he did if Russia did not possess a nuclear arsenal? Probably, though. Russia's batshit crazy. There's some good people here, but they're crazies. They would have been taken over by dictators for so long. He's been there for 23 years. American politician Barry Goldwater ran against Democrat Lyndon B. Johnson, who said that if anybody was shooting in the Gulf of Tonkin, they were shooting at whales because nobody attacked the military, was the catalyst used to convince Americans to go to war in Vietnam against people that ultimately chased them out of there. They chemtrailing Vietnam. They chemtrailed Vietnam for 9 years with Agent Orange, a toxin and dioxin. And you still can't convince the average person that they know how to chemtrail. Just zombie. Threatened the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam. Now, we've seen all kinds of examples. The same thing for China in the 50s. And many military strategists were eager to test out nuclear weapons. When you actually look at the things they did do and the things they wanted to do, they wanted to create places like the Suez Canal with nuclear weapons, right? They wanted to, there's just so many of them. They wanted to use big aquifers by detonating nuclear weapons. They wanted to also have underground storage for liquid and natural gas with nuclear detonations. All of these, you end up with so much radiation. Let's not forget that a Soviet submarine nearly launched nuclear torpedoes at the U.S. Navy in 1962. There are many incidences where the world came close to nuclear weapons being deployed. At the start of 2021, 9 nuclear-armed states got more weapons than they need or could use. They can't use these weapons, is the thing about that, right? You can't use them. But you better do the maintenance because you could have an event, right? So it just eats the resources, eats all the precious metals on the planet permanently because you can't reuse it. And then the stuff is always emitting radiation. It's just that whole production is killing our planet from the radioactive fallout on top of it. From so many facets. So many different countries. Keeping in view Pakistan, which has streets of deformed children down there from dumping their nuclear into the local rivers years ago. Threats of using nuclear weapons, and we cover that all the time. And the scenes at the Zapor nuclear plant in Ukraine on fire from shelling. Look, the Russians, it was people holding hands was the only thing stopping the Russians from getting to the plant. They didn't have to fight for the plant because otherwise then you would have a nuclear meltdown going on there. 60 million one-ton bags in Japan. A nuclear war would be catastrophic, but so would be a nuclear accident. And accidents cannot be avoided. Yeah, anybody who says they can't have an accident is dreaming. Alec teaches at Sydney College of Arts, University of Sydney, Australia. He's the closest we've seen yet to being well, like, so hard to find anybody out there in universities that's even likable, let alone honest. Kremlin official, Russia will only use nuclear arms if their existence is threatened. We covered this last night, quotes from that guy. Everybody's probably seen it if they're following the media anyway. There have been concerns about Russian forces using nuclear arms since Russia's President Vladimir Putin put the country's nuclear deterrent forces on alert. That was amplified throughout the medias. The International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, unannounced, just went into Ukraine allegedly to start delivering nuclear safety and security assistance. No, I don't believe that one. The military conflict, he's got Putin's personal number, that feller. Putin, Ukraine's nuclear power plants and other facilities with radioactive material in unprecedented dangers. Yeah, the nuclear industry is getting a black eye since this started. Really, right? The whole world's starting to hate nuclear more and more every day. If it keeps going, nuclear is in real trouble. They're doing all kinds of counter, but they're too weak. They don't have the heart. They don't have the honesty. Nuclear industry doesn't have a single spokesperson that is likable, is rememberable. They don't, right? They don't have a single spokesperson. Arnie Gunnarsson was the closest they had. But he's not open. His wife was a spokesperson for the nuclear industry for a couple of decades on top of that. Reduces the risk of a sudden nuclear accident that could have a severe health environmental impact both in Ukraine and beyond. What do you mean beyond, Director General Grossi? Beyond. Well, no, I don't know. Tell me. They won't. See, they won't actually define what beyond means. Beyond means the entire planet, but they're never going to acknowledge that. The nuclear industry it's right now it's like living on one leg. If you give it a push, it's going to tip over for sure. Johnson's big push on UK nuclear power leaves investors weary. See? Nations need private finance to help fund new atomic reactors. So Britain is broke as frig, eh? Renewables like offshore wind, because you give it all to the nuclear industry, right? The nuclear industry, the nuclear submarines, the nuclear power plants have never been decommissioned. The list goes on and on. They take the money, but they won't do nothing. Like offshore wind competing for investor capital. Offshore wind and solar with geothermal and tidal backup and compressed air storage and pumped hydro storage. It's game over for every other thing out there. Right? It's here, it's available, it's obsolete technology. You just need somebody to put it all together like that. You can power any city out there with no issues, 100% renewables. And you can do it within the next, you can have it up and running in about 3 years. Nuclear industry's crapping themselves. They control the media and they control the universities. They control key positions in government. They'll kill the planet rather than let the planet have a future. Because the inbreeds of the inbreeds are in charge, right? Their parents were scum, degenerate inbreeds that worked in the industry and helped destroy countries. These are actual cockroaches we're talking about. Which is why we got a poll tonight. We got a poll. Can the cockroach nuclear industry survive without hundreds of thousands of nuclear cockroaches and degenerate scumbags? 35 votes, 89%. Satellite. Under policy, competition from renewables and concerns about how attractive the financial returns will be. It's pathetic that they can't fund themselves. Could be a major stumbling block for the degenerate scumbag government. This is over the top. They're showing you a future nuclear power plant surrounded by farms. Do you got any idea how actually evil that actually is? The power plants are hemorrhaging radiation all the time. That's why it's built in that environment. That's the future one. That is probably one of the most disturbing things you'll ever see. That they do this all the time, and they still want to continue to do it despite how evil it actually is. How monstrous it actually is to do something like that. You got to be in unbelievably, just unimaginably evil to build a nuclear power plant in farm country. That's the definition of... Now, Sellafield is the same thing, right? It's surrounded by farms. It melted down in the 50s. It's still hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the ocean, the Atlantic, but it's still hemorrhaging radiation because it also... It's stopped production as far as I know now, but it done mixed oxide, produced mixed oxide fuel there for about 60 years. So what that means, because you got to boil the spent fuel rods in acid at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. You can't destroy the radiation, so you can extract certain facets, like uranium and plutonium fission products. And a lot of it is vented out of the building and ends up in the farms. Plus it has a nuclear mixed oxide fuel meltdown at the site for 70 years. Even today, it's still 8 million liters minimum a day hemorrhaging out of that place of radioactive death water. Could nuclear material stolen from Chernobyl be used in a dirty bomb? The scientists at Chernobyl, that cracks me up. These are incredible degenerates. If they're working at Chernobyl, these scientists, they're up to no good. It says that radioactive material was stolen by looters during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it's not hard to get nuclear scientists to work there because there's so many of these disgusting parasites. Like I've been at it for years. It still boggles the mind how evil they really are. And when we get to see it all the time, right? 5 days a week. I see it all day, all night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I actually live in hell. I have no escape from it either. But it's got to get done, right? It's just... I got probably the worst job on our planet. During the Russia invasion of Ukraine, there's a picture coming up. The anniversary of Chernobyl is the 26th of this month, or next month, April. Radioactive material been stolen from a laboratory near the Chernobyl nuclear power plant during the chaos caused by the Russian invasion. And the danger of the so-called dirty bombs being made from the material is minimal. Oh, new scientists. They produced so many studies after Fukushima to keep the children in Fukushima. Oh no, it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in sun. That's the new scientists. Again, it goes back to the poll we got tonight. Can nuclear survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags? No, of course not. New scientists probably got 100 degenerate scumbags over the last 10 years. A scientist working for Ukraine's Institute for Safety Problems at a nuclear power plant who asked to remain anonymous for security reasons, of course, confirmed to the degenerate new scientists, the scumbags of scumbags, that radioactive material was stolen or probably stolen. See, when you say confirmed, probably is not the same as confirmed. They're big shot new scientists. Stolen from a radiation monitoring laboratory in the mostly abandoned city of Chernobyl. The mostly abandoned. Confirmed. Radioactive material was probably scumbags, but confirmed and probably in the same sentence. The site was looted in the wake of Russia's invasion on the 24th of February. They looted the nuclear wasteland, yeah? Good for them. What did they loot from a nuclear wasteland? Scientists say the communication with another lab that houses powerful sources of gamma and neutron radiation. That's frightening. Are they running a bioweapons lab at Fukushima, I wonder? Has also been cut off. So it is possible, probable and possible. There's some hard cases, eh? Probable and possible. That's pretty probable. So confirmed, probable, possible, confirmed. So it is possible the material's gone missing from there too, but we don't know. But new scientists will run with it. I think it's probable and possible that these people are lunatics. Merck says that the probable small amount of material would be of very limited use in the construction of a dirty bomb. Fukushima was a dirty bomb. They're burning it in incinerators. That's a dirty bomb. A-10 Warthogs, all they shoot is dirty bombs. The Abrams tank mostly shoots dirty bombs. There's 155 millimeter depleted uranium munitions. Kill everything within 900 feet, 3 football field kill ratio, and leaves a crater 100 feet wide and 50 feet deep of depleted uranium. That's a dirty bomb. Essentially, radioactive material combined with conventional explosives. What, like the British detonated in Australia? There's around 700 of those dirty bombs. Australia used to wait for the wind to blow towards the capital cities, the major farmlands and aquifers, before they would detonate their nuclear bombs down there. Because they love you so much. There are so many radioactive sources around the world. If someone wants to get their hands on it, there's an easier way, which is 100% true. Nuclear industry would be happy if you took it off their hands. But look at them running away with it. It's so awesome. If they have plutonium lying around in offices, actually that won't even surprise me, to tell you the truth, then they have massively broken global contamination laws. And there are clear rules from the International Atomic Energy Agency. Doesn't have any sovereignty over any country. They have all the rules they want. I got rules. No one pays attention. No one pays attention to the IAEA. What are they going to do? Yell at you on a phone or something? Russia's soldiers inhaled clouds of radioactive dust when they seized Chernobyl. And your problem is workers were left working under gunpoint to keep the station working. You really think that the Russian soldiers were stood there pointing guns at them? Push that button now. Two sources says soldiers in the convoy had no protection from the site's radiation, and another branded it suicidal as they rampaged through thick radioactive dust that they would have inhaled, leaving radiation inside their body. We talked about this originally because that's what I came out and said. It's 100% fact. Russian tanks rolling through the Red Forest, well, it's anywhere in Ukraine for that matter, let alone Chernobyl, which is the most radioactive part of the site. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom. Just driving the dusty roads down there can get you sick in increments over time from the radiation. Just drinking the water down there. The industry is disgusting. That's a picture you don't see too often right there. There's a garbage disposal site. We call them rivers, right? But they were going to dredge the rivers a couple of years ago for tourists. And there was a big outcry because you can poison 29 million people downriver. You got any idea how deadly that river is? If you spend an hour on that river, you're probably a dead man just from the exposures. They actually got a pond in the city. If you spend an hour on the pond, you will actually die. They call it, the locals call it Dead Man Pond. But all radiation must run down the hill. The industry is so evil. It just leaves me just... So I was doing this today, and I seen that picture, and I was like, oh, that's right. All the radiation ends up in the river. Mayak, years before that, used to just dump it in the river, the Tetra River. Didn't bother telling anybody. People started dropping dead hundreds of miles downriver. The river was used to be at that time... There's a lot of little tiny communities that don't exist anymore. Like an absurd number. It's like 7,500 communities or something total are gone. That's a scary picture right there. That is one frightening, brutal picture. You got a nuclear meltdown right alongside a river that runs down to the ocean. Dutch parliamentarians urges the minister to decide on nuclear plant construction. Our esteemed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was down to Europe a few days ago in the European Parliament. They basically kicked him out. It was the damnedest thing I've ever seen. They gave it to him hardcore too. You're a despot. All you've done to Canadians is destroy their futures. You're a despicable person. I mean, lit him up like I've never seen before. Urges ministers to decide on a nuclear plant construction. A couple of people in the Dutch politics urged the ministers to decide. And you know the kid in hold a dike with his finger? Remember that story? That looks like a great spot to put a nuclear reactor right there. Get rid of all those ducks pretty quick. Members of the lower house of parliament have been pushing for climate minister. I shouldn't laugh because they're nasty people, right? Rob Jetson, they use climate right now as justification for cruel and just barbaric attacks upon people. To confirm, well, usually impoverished people, they can't fight back, obviously, but when construction of the two promised nuclear power plants is set to start. Well, what are you talking about? We just wanted the money, which is what we typically see, right? As the Russian invasion of Ukraine rages on, the subject of finding alternatives to Russia have become a priority. If it becomes a priority, what the frig are you looking at nuclear for? 10 to 20 years before you get it up and running, if you'll get it running. Lots of plants have been built and still don't work. And you can have all the renewables and have a real future and still be able to get kickbacks, you scumbags. The government has already discussed the addition of nuclear power as a supplement for solar, geothermal, and wind energy. Yeah, if you use pumped hydro and compressed air, and Lord knows Dutch got lots of water you can use. So if you use compressed air storage and pumped hydro storage, you don't need oil, gas, coal, or nuclear. And if you can back that up with geothermal and tidal, and Dutch can back it up with tidal, or are they too stupid? Maybe they're too stupid, who knows? According to the Nuclear Energy Agency, that's the scariest words imaginable. They literally eat babies once a year. I'm just making that up now, folks, because the media will chop that out and say, data says they eat babies. It's a proverbial sense where they kill children with radioactive fallout, scumbag. Building a large nuclear unit can take 5 to 7 years. Really? 5 to 7 years. Obviously, you're not paying attention to what really goes on. We are now going to accelerate the energy transition to reduce our dependency on Russia. This is the nuclear industry, 100%. It's not supposed to make sense. It's just supposed to be rah-rah nuclear. And you can throw all the money you want at nuclear, but you still can't get it built any quicker than it's going to be built. And doing it because you don't like Russia all of a sudden is not the solution, because it could take you 10 or 15 years to get your elixir up and working. The International Atomic Energy Agency, lapdog, makes unannounced visit to Ukraine to launch safety assistance. I'm not just going to stand up in front of these posters anymore. I'm going to go out and do something. This is a goblin. That's the only way you can describe Raphael. His friends do, so he's not offended or nothing. He's a goblin. That's how he got. Do you think he got the job because he's a good person? Is there actually people that gullible left on this planet? I think there actually is, isn't it? I shouldn't say do what you think. I know there is. Just crossed the border in Ukraine, he said on his Twitter, to start the IAEA mission to ensure safety and security of the country's nuclear facility. That's quite the press release. You're in the bunker with Zelensky somewhere in Poland, probably. We must act now to help prevent the danger of a nuclear accident. What danger? More Pacific. Why are you so vague all the time, Grossi? He's such a despicable sack of excrement. The aim of the Director General, the Director General. If you're the Director General of scumbags, you're not really a Director General, now are you? You're the leader of a cult, maybe, but you're not a Director General. Just because you got the title under the corporation charter doesn't make you somebody. And they use the word general, like he's in the military. To initiate prompt safety and security support to Ukraine nuclear facilities. We want a hero. We need meatloaf now. Pentagon's got $733 billion budget. Nuclear industry's like, woohoo! Getting that swimming pool in the front garden this year. We got one in the back. Now we got one out in the front. Try topping that. That'll piss the neighborhood off. Ukraine is scrubbing nuclear agencies of Russian influence. Fear of nuclear sabotage. You've seen a lot. That's like right out of the blue we see these types of headlines. And they're always coordinated, aren't they? to get a memo in the morning at the media is, okay, we got to do here's the stories, who's going to put their name on it? Nuclear industry writes the stories. Concerned about the possible enemy within surface last week when Ukraine state broadcaster reported an official with the state nuclear power company had been detained. Moves to root out the Russian threat within Ukraine are, however, sowing confusion as they start pointing fingers at each other. No, he's a rat. The silence and inaction of the international nuclear community paved the way for World War III, to a global nuclear disaster and the collapse of the energy system. Well, what he's basically saying that if you have another nuclear meltdown, the nuclear industry can't come back from it. They're already on their heels, right? They're on one leg and on their heel on top of that. China plans a doomsday train for nuclear missiles, and it can carry out launches and stuff like that. Putin has supersonic ones. North Korea got ones that can reach America. Everybody's supposed to be sitting in a corner with the lights off, sucking their thumb on a flashlight pointed up the front of their face, right? Then they'll all take a day off probably at that stage. Will non-thermal nuclear fusion be the holy grail of clean energy? Why not just renewables? Why not use wind and solar backed up with thermal energy from the earth, backed up by tidal energy, backed up by pumped air storage and compressed air storage rather than pumped hydro storage. And Nikola Tesla showed us we can transport energy long distances. Nuclear industry's waiting because they want to take the credit for that too at some point in the near future, right? Australia-based deep tech startup HB11 Energy has successfully exhibited. This is just, and it's from interesting engineers, so it's kind of like reading it on the bathroom walls of McDonald's. It's garbage, but high precision lasers start fusion reactions between hydrogen and boron-11 rather than heating hydrogen isotopes to 100 million degree temperatures. I'll give them credit, right? It's a new take. Creating this fusion energy will achieve wonders in the way of safe, clean. As soon as you hear the word safe and clean, that's vomit material. And abundant energy for the whole world. Whoever done that shouldn't be allowed to write articles anymore for a couple of years. These findings takes us one step closer to creating clean, safe, and reliable energy at better prices. Too cheap to meter. And in greater abundance than the existing renewable energy sources combined. Unless you take renewable energies like wind and solar and you pair it up with thermal earth energy straight up from the earth and tidal energy, back that up with storage from compressed air and pumped hydro. If you took the money they're burning on this and the other fusion, you could solve the problem right away. Problem solved. If you took all those scientists, and the money that they waste and the enthusiasm, they're going to come up with a solution that save the world and their pensions. World. These people work on the fusion reactor their whole life and don't accomplish nothing. And they got a big pension, their children got a job working there, and their children will have a job working on it, and they'll never accomplish it. This is what's been going on for about 90 years, right? Universities are making a killing. And it's a write-off for the investors. Let's see if these groundbreaking results will lead to a scalable, clean energy and help us reverse the effects of global warming caused by climate change. Ain't you a good little bootlicker? The global warming is caused by decades of reactor radiation fallout, because radiation is not like, so snow, if you had the whole planet covered in snow, you would have an ice age, right? If you got the whole planet covered in radioactive fallout, pumping heat every second for millions of years, you're in a global planet warming, right? That's going to heat up the entire planet. It never stops. It's always emitting, yet all these other planets emitting. What will happen after Croatia's intention to dispose of nuclear waste near BiH border? And all nuclear power plants, except for a few, are surrounded by farms. That should terrify the daylights out of you. Another option available when experts complete their work on soil testing are lawsuits to the European Court of Human Rights. It is being considered that citizens will react individually because it will be a violation of their basic human rights. Maybe everybody should start suing nuclear power plants. If you eat food from a farm by a nuclear power plant, you really should sue the nuclear industry for doing that. That nuclear power plant and the farmers, sue them in court too. Make them stop murdering everybody. In accordance with the conventions, they can file individual lawsuits against Croatia, and collective lawsuits are possible. So Croatia owns half of the Krško power plant in Slovenia. They got to take over half the waste by 2023. Something in it. They got to take the waste back. Just madness. Which is why it's been, this is how the nuclear industry survives, by the way. Which is why it has been conducting serious preparatory analysis for the storage and disposal of nuclear waste. Such a move could endanger the lives of about 250,000 inhabitants in the river basin and the natural environment. Nuclear radiation becoming a campaign issue, by the way. It's time for the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. Runs out in July, I think. Chernobyl is cited the world's worst nuclear reactor disaster. Okay, so now you've showed your patriotism to the nuclear industry by saying that. Chernobyl was a brand new reactor, 2 years old, and it was a graphite reactor. It was 200 tons. Each of the missing reactors in Japan were around 800 tons. At the top of the buildings were 2 fuel pools full of decades of reactor cores. So 8 fuel pools, each fuel pool with multiple reactor cores in it because they don't have a repository anywhere in Japan. And the reactor cores from the buildings are gone. That were pure uranium, pure plutonium. And reactor 3 in Japan was a mixed oxide, which was 1 billion times worse than a normal meltdown. And they're going to say Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear accident ever, world's worst ever nuclear reactor disaster. Every story, right, we'll see that connotation. Which means you don't have a media that you can turn to. Nuclear industry pretty crazy. Nuclear industry is pretty crazy. So we got a poll for everybody tonight. We're waiting somewhere. There it is. Can nuclear survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags? What we got, like 9 people said no? Or yes? If that's 9 people refuse to acknowledge they're degenerate scumbags, obviously. But 87% of the people got the 411 right. They're the same people probably think Chernobyl's the world's worst nuclear disaster too. The 9 people who voted yes. It's pretty amazing that we actually got, there's actually 9 people on the planet that's gullible. They voted yes. Just when you think you've seen it all, you got to check out my... Okay, hang on. Yes. I smurfed it up. Hang on. Oh, me darling, oh, me darling. That's okay, Timber, don't worry about it. I always forget to remind people that you can't take the vote back on the poll. So some people do, they just enthusiastic and start clicking. The world consciousness has been reinvigorated with concern about nuclear radiation, and the concern over radiation never waned for those in America West who continue to live with the disastrous health consequences from the Cold War. This is radioactive fallout victims from the nuclear testing, nuclear emissions, nuclear dumping. Cale Weston, a former diplomat and Democratic challenger to Senator, announced his candidacy with one issue front and center. His opponents had failed to protect Utah by supporting the bipartisan Radiation Exposure Compensation Act known as RECA. The bill is going to expire in a couple of months. Center for Disease Control and Prevention research shows that all people who were born in the contagious U.S. after 1951 have received some exposure to radiation from the Cold War era nuclear testing. That's a shocking statement, isn't it? Wow. But those in proximity or downwind of testing sites face dramatically increased odds for cancer and other long-term health problems like heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory, pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes and Down syndrome. There's around 1,800. For many, including Weston's father, the cost of living near nuclear testing sites has been their lives. Well, there's no such thing as downwind. There's downriver. They got rid of that and called it downwind. So people think if they don't live downhill from the nuclear power plant, they're okay. Without congressional actions, RECA will expire July 2022. 3 months. Not even 3 months. Because of the arbitrarily drawn lines of eligibility written into the original 1990 bill, many downwinders, well, you gotta leap tall buildings and fly faster than a speeding bullet to actually qualify. They made it, and they left most of the people out because of the criteria. They drew up a law for Hanford 2 years ago, and they're still fighting over it. But the law right now is still in effect. It says that if you worked a single day at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, a 580 square mile nuclear wasteland, if you worked there for 8-hour shift, you probably could be entitled to a pension if you got sick after that in the next 20, 30, 40 years. You could be entitled to a pension because you would have got irradiated. And so radiation is very dangerous for a very long time in very small amounts. And the amounts are not enough that you would... It's not like a spider where you can see it moving, see? Where you can't smell it or see it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up. So it doesn't really exist for the average person. Many downwinders, others impacted individuals, like uranium workers, are not eligible for compensation neither in Utah or in states across the West and territories in the Pacific. Neither Utah senator is leading ongoing discussions that would expand the RECA, which is going to expire. Even existing compensation is inadequate, given the soaring costs of health care. I'll get to that. Radiation does not stop at county lines, and we have known for many years that the wind carries fallout throughout Idaho, not downwind, but throughout Idaho and Montana and Colorado and Guam, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. So not downwind, but everywhere. Shockingly, even people in areas surrounding the Trinity test site in New Mexico, where the first ever nuclear weapon was detonated, they were told it was a munition factory had went off or something, have never been eligible for compensation. Radiation-induced illness affects the entire communities, regardless of ages, age, economic status, race, gender, political affiliations. Expanding RECA would bring life-changing support to both potato farmers. Don't tell me they're harvesting potatoes in a nuclear wasteland, for God's sakes, in Idaho, and impact in Navajo with 15,000 abandoned uranium mines on their traditional land. And Plubo, my apologies if I butchered your name, in the Four Corner regions. Why pull the plug on downwinders? You're not calling it downwinders. And uranium works, especially when the bills have such bipartisan support. RECA is a vital, well, the nuclear industry wants it gone, right? And they control the media, they control the universities, and a lot of the key positions in government. RECA is a vital lifeline for individuals that live with the lifelong impact of radiation. Many have been going bankrupt trying to cover the cost of cancer care. And they use chemotherapy to finish them off. The ultimate evilness, eh? It really is the ultimate evilness, the nuclear industry. Cover the cost of cancer. To murder them with the chemotherapy. There's a cure for cancer. I'll show it to you. Because I like you so much. It's called DCA. Canada banned it. It's just a mineral. It's like banning vitamin C or vitamin D or zinc or potassium. It's absurd. DCA and 99% pure is salted, so it's not quite as caustic as pure powder. And so these are basically pills, so you just take the pills. They're already put together for you. You can cure cancer for about $99. It reduced all tumors by 70% in the first 3 weeks. So you didn't need invasive surgery because you had a big tumor squat in one of your organs. And it eradicated the cancer in 90 days typically or less. And it's been used in exotic illnesses and diseases. It had no adverse side effects. It's just a mineral. All it does is plate your blood. And lo and behold, cancer can't survive in that environment. I would use, and I do, the pure DCA. And some of this will ship to Canada, by the way. Like that one there ships to Canada. I think this stuff is pure. Yeah, that stuff is pure. That's the better stuff. And you only want to use a tiny bit in a small glass of water several times a day, 3 times, 4 times a day, because your body can only absorb so much of a mineral at any given time. But you can just buy the pills and take 1 pill each day too, right? This is a miracle drug. It's not a drug, it's just a mineral that annihilates cancer. And that the researcher in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada, couldn't get funding from the university to do human trials, had to get private funding. They say, oh, well, there's no money to be made in it because there's no patent on it. Well, there's no patent on vitamin C or vitamin D or vitamin E, but you see that in all the shops and supermarkets, don't you? Perpetual lawyers. Hello, two Danas. Cover the cost of cancer. It was really only cost you $100 instead of your RECA money. The maximum RECA compensation is $50,000. And while no amount of money can bring back those killed by radiation poisoning, this pittance does not even cover the average $150,000 cancer cost in America today. It doesn't cure, like chemo doesn't cure cancer. Hang on. What am I looking for here? Oh, yeah. There you are. Yeah, and let's go that route there, I guess. So if you look up this study, there, the original conclusion based on facts, 1985, and redone the study in 2004, says the 3% efficiency of chemotherapy treatment on cancer cure. Only 3% of the people live longer with it than without it. An estimated 2.3% in Australia and 2.1% in the United States lived longer with chemo than without it. And what they say is that it's better to take nothing whatsoever than it is to take chemo. That way, at least you got a 50-50 chance, and your quality of life is not destroyed immediately by the chemotherapy. And that women that have chemotherapy are brutalized in particular. It was discovered that human kidneys, by the way, are at least 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys at removing plutonium. What that means is that the studies that they base danger upon are false. Because they say, you know, we kill all these animals and that's our guideline, but it's not. Because animals' kidneys are 50% less, or 50 times less efficient. It takes 50 times more, see, to kill the animal or the human. Or the animal than it does the human. I'll get it. The nuclear industry's complex already disproportionately harms the poor. And by the way, 3% is the typical misdiagnosis for leukemias and cancers. Leukemia is the cancer of the blood, right? And that happens, that can happen, not cancer of the blood, I'm sorry. Leukemia is basically where you're producing more red blood cells than white blood cells. You have your hypoxia too, right? So your body has no nutrition, no oxygen, and so it can't survive. Your body breaks down, you can't uptake nutrition or anything else. And so when you got radiation, that's what radiation does to you. You get radiation, if you're eating it all the time, radiation is sequestering all the time more and more and more. What that means is your body attacks each atom in your body. Like You don't get microsieverts or millisieverts or unisievers. When you're eating, you get atoms, physical ionizing isotopes. Your body attacks that for the rest of your life with white blood cells. That displaces your red blood cells. Your red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition throughout your body. So as you keep displacing the red blood cells with white blood cells, that's called leukemia eventually, and you have no oxygen at 21%, you die. U.S. spends over $60 billion a year maintaining the nuclear arsenal, and has yet only spent $2.5 billion on compensating RECA claimants over 31 years. $600 billion every decade, but a total of just $2.5 billion in their 31 years. So $1.8 trillion maintaining the nuclear weapons, and just $2.5 billion, a percent of a percent, on the victims. So that's greedy. That's just greedy. That's just greediness. See? That's just evil now. There is no functional military or government. That fantasy went out a couple of 100 years ago, I guess. Nuclear industry is fighting back tonight. Yeah, 51 votes, but 18% says the nuclear industry can survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags. But a stoic 82% said no. I usually attribute those discrepancies is that the pro-nuclear got a whole bunch of ghost accounts and they're spamming us, right? There really can't be that many people out there. There really can't. Experts concerned Russia could deploy small tactical nuclear weapons. Geez, experts got Russia's going to do this, Russia's going to do that. It's all going to be nuclear. They're just driving the nuclear fear insane, aren't they? Right? They want to be able to justify using nuclear weapons against Russia, I guess. Experts concerned Russia could deploy small tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Lots of American soldiers in Ukraine, British and French. Mercenaries too. Energy crisis. Belgium gets behind nuclear power. Energy crisis. They're blaming that on 4 weeks of Russia and Ukraine. So it's an agenda, 100% we're seeing. The evidence is just overwhelming at this stage. Well, Russia's down there. We got to get nuclear power because Russia's down there, you know. So in other words, makes nuclear look like it's good. The original story was Russia's shooting at nuclear power plants. Gee, Russia's going into a country with 50 nuclear power plants. Now the story is nuclear is great. We're going to get more nuclear. Look at Russia. A new poll revealed that only 9% of Belgians would support an immediate closure of all nuclear power plants in the country. Immediate closure. A lot of them worked there, I guess. A considerable swing in popular support for nuclear power, with 15% backing a complete withdrawal just 3 months ago. So every 3 months you're doing a poll on this? Really? The most popular plan is the construction of a new smaller reactor. That's back in the news, is it? We're going to have to listen to that for another couple of weeks, are we? Which appears to 43% of the Belgians compared to 33% 3 months ago. You don't have small reactors on the planet for comparison. That's embarrassing. You ain't gonna have one. Right? You got to get one that works. You got to get all the kinks out of it on top of that. Then you got to build a new one with all the improvements. It's 30 years down the road, 40 years down the road at best. But renewables will pick that up and drop it on his head really soon. Our top search term is nuclear. U.S. bunker sales soar as anxiety over Russia rises. No, the media got everybody petrified that Russia's going to go around sticking nuclear weapons up everybody's bum and setting them off. In the past month, I would have normally field less than 100 inquiries. Now it's over 3,000. He said he sold 5 bunkers on a single day in February last month, with prices ranging from $70,000 to $240,000. Business is good. Ukraine has at least 5,000 publicly accessible bomb shelters. 5,000. They didn't see this coming, did they? Johnson's energy strategy held up over nuclear funding row with Sunak. It's like a fish, isn't he? He looks like a fish. He sounds like a fish, too. He thinks like a fish on top of that. Strategy, like he doesn't do anything. He gets his picture taken and his hand shook and goes home with the check. Strategy could require up to 8 new nuclear power stations to be built. These are small modular reactors, go figure. They can't, like the nuclear power plant they're trying to build now is over 30 billion euros. They can't build 8 at 13 billion all of a sudden. So that's small modular reactors they're talking about again. Yeah, you Sonny. The Queen is there. Lift his hand. Draft targets suggest ministers are looking at 30 gigawatts of nuclear power. 30 gigawatts with 8? They can do it with renewables in just 2 years if they wanted to, right? They're a broke-ass country now. They stole everything, nothing left for anybody. That's why Boris got the job. Bubble-through nuclear engine might be the future NASA, who brought us James Hansen. So NASA's in the shit house because of that. James Hansen. Hopefully he goes to jail for the rest of his natural life for what he's done. Bubble-through nuclear engine might be a future, might be a way down the future. It's got to be something to do with, if it's anything to do with nuclear, the media will fawn over that and drool over that for a couple of days, and then it's, nobody cares. Except the people trying to get investors to buy into it, I suppose. Nuclear thermal propulsion rocket engine. Bubble-through liquid fuel reactor. So it's not like your conventional... I don't like the word reactor in anything. It's like Russian roulette. Some Ukrainians seek refuge at nuclear power plants. Like a lot of this technology, you got to keep an eye on it. They're not... Never mind. I'll cover it because I got a big folder on this stuff. It's like Russian roulette. Some Ukrainians seek refuge at nuclear power plants. So suggesting that that's probably a bad spot to go, right? If Russia wanted to blow up a nuclear power plant, they would have. All you got to do is knock out external power supply, hit the transmission lines inside the site, and you can't, the generators won't matter. Nuclear power plants run on external power, right? They usually got like 8 hours of fuel for the generators on site. No, if Germany or if Russia wanted to crush Ukraine, they would have. There's something much more sinister going on here. German nuclear power phase out is pure madness. They just phased out the COVID banners at the top of all the news sites. Since Russia began, that disappeared. From John Law, founder, Clean Energy Revolution, London, W2 UK. He's quite proud of himself, isn't he? It already, in fact, has been an ideal energy source. Really, not another one of you friggers, is it? Which you could employ, but for purely ideological reasons is choosing not to. It has 6 nuclear reactors, time of Germany. 3 are still operating. Oh, they're crying about Germany. And 3 recently switched off in December. The other 3 will be switched off this December coming, right? 2022 in Germany. Such electricity would be carbon-free. Like, nuclear is not carbon-free. Not when you're running it, not when you're producing nuclear, not when you're getting the fuse cycle, not when you're digging it out of the earth. It's the most carbon-intensive thing in human history. And to run a nuclear power plant is unbelievably carbon-intensive. Not only that, you got to boil off 1 million gallons of water every minute. That's an absurd amount of carbon you're releasing into the environment every minute. 440 nuclear power plants worldwide on top of that. And then the fuel is always hemorrhaging atoms because it's splitting the atoms. It's a perpetual machine at that stage, right? For millions of years producing atoms that are nothing on the planet has an autoimmune defense against. Nothing with splitting cells on the planet knows how to defend itself from nuclear, and it annihilates and destroys everything in increments. To fail to take advantage of such pre-existing clean generation capacity. Again, right, they portray it as if it was some starving dog on the side of the road and 1,000 people drove by it and wouldn't even look at it. You know, poor nuclear, the little puppy eyes, poor little thing. Nuclear killed the puppy and have a party for it. The dead corpse. By continuing with the planned nuclear phase-out, Germany would be pure madness in these now significantly altered circumstances because of Stalin's Vladimir Putin. His parents worked for Stalin, right? He's a dictator after 23 years. John Law, founder of Clean Energy Revolution. Promoting nuclear is not clean energy, and I disrespect you for calling your company Clean Energy Revolution, and for putting your name in like that there in the title. The founder of Clean Energy, the founder of Bullshit Incorporation at Financial Times. Yes, the defense posts. You're always a little weary when you click on that page, or pages like it. What are they sticking in my cookies, I wonder? U.S. soldiers conduct chemical, biological, and nuclear exercises. This one here is allegedly a plane with chemical or radiation. They're just vultures, eh? Remember the various U.S. National Armed U.S. Army National Guard units have participated in a biannual chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive exercise in Alaska in the winter. As part of the training, the National Guardsmen, coordinating with civilian assets, traders, and federal agencies like the fire department. I didn't know fire departments were federal agencies. Several scenarios were presented during the exercise, including infiltrating a simulated chemical weapons laboratory, a fear-mongering, eh? And responding to a simulated plane crash with radioactive contamination. You shouldn't be flying on a plane with radiation, bozo. Lacks facilities for storing toxic waste. Now, we covered that last night, right? Experts, in that case, Clear in United Kingdom, Clear the Scumbag from United Kingdom, the skank, a deep geological disposal facility, deep geological repository, was proposed about 50 years ago, and the UK is still decades away from constructing one. UK, the UK, not the nuclear industry, but the UK. Don't put a bad light on the nuclear industry. And nobody out there does that, right? Nobody out there will just call a nuclear idiot. We had that one guy last night, right? That story last night about Chernobyl, but he used to run Chernobyl after the accident. He called IAEA Rafael Grossi a coward. I enjoyed that a lot. I counted Rafael Grossi cowards like you would count sheep when you're trying to sleep at nighttime. I never get past 20. Last night I never even got to 15. I fell asleep. One little Rafael Grossi sheep jumping over the fence. Too little. You're getting sleepy now. It'll need to be kept on site for 140 years from the new reactors, the mixed oxide fuel reactors, before being transferred to a deep geological repository, assuming one is ever built in the United Kingdom. 140 years for the fuel to stay in the pool. It's splitting the atom the whole time. Those atoms are sucked up by the water. The water evaporates 120,000 liters a day, and then the atoms are released into the environment. It's cruel and evil what they do. They murder everything and everybody and pretend that they're actually human. They actually look in the mirror and say, I'm a good person. I am. And the mirror's like, no, you're not. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's true. Disposing of radioactive waste from nuclear power plants built in the 50s. They skipped the 60s because they dumped it in the ocean in the 60s and 80s. In the 90s, it's climbed to 131 billion euros. United Kingdom dumped their nuclear waste for 2 decades straight in the Atlantic. Ruthless, eh? And a lot of it in shallow water and prime fishing spots. Cost of constructing a deep geological disposal site approaches 53 billion euro, which is almost 70 billion US. To dig a hole in the ground, 70 billion. You come out and they're already up to 20 billion for litigation. Frozen in time, rescued film near Chernobyl shows life before the nuclear disaster. Wasn't that a party? Might have been the gin. Might have been the 3-4 6-pack. I don't know, but describes the Chernobyl exclusion zone as being frozen in time. So I was amazed at how the Soviet Union evacuated the people, promising, just like the Japanese, promised them they would return in a few days, not allowing people to take with them priceless things like letters or photos or pictures. They didn't realize they would never be back to their homes where they were born and where they lived their whole lives. Yeah, that's the same old story all over the world when it comes to nuclear. They destroy everything permanently. They can't, that's what they do, right? They don't do something good, they destroy everything good. More than 100,000 people were evacuated from their homes. There's 500,000 in Fukushima. There's a Chernobyl here, causing at least 30 deaths in the immediate aftermath. Not counting the 600 helicopter pilots who all died right away, of course, because they don't count. No one in Russia is thinking about using nuclear weapons. Oh, okay. That's why they got those things, I suppose. Exhibition to mark 40 years since the Nuclear-Free Wales Declaration visits Wexham. That's a great story, eh? It's an extraordinary story, really. The campaign for nuclear disarmament in Wales is marking the 40th anniversary of the Nuclear-Free Wales Declaration with an exhibition touring Wales. That should have been somewhere else. The campaign for nuclear disarmament in Wales is marking the 40th anniversary. Free Wales Declaration. I already done that, didn't I? They declared a nuclear-free zone on the 23rd of February, 1982. After all 8 local authorities refused the United Kingdom government instruction to draw up civil defense plans, including establishing nuclear bunkers. In response, the Welsh local authorities passed resolution declaring themselves a nuclear-free zone. This is actually astounding, really. The Nuclear Ban Treaty, which came into force January 2021, is the first legally binding international agreement to comprehensively prohibit nuclear weapons. The treaty is currently sponsored by 130 countries at United Nations, 195 militaries, which is United Nations, which is not even supposed to exist, eh? Currently, none of the existing nuclear weapon states have signed the treaty. No, it's just to stop you from ever acquiring nuclear weapons. When you talk about United Nations, you're talking about the lowest forms of life in history. And the problem with the United Nations is a lot of the people that work for it don't even understand what the big picture is. That's why it works so well, see? They're just all I work for United Nations. You shut your mouth. Big shut. I can rape your wife and children. I work for United Nations. Well, that's what they said to the Somalians anyway. Well, nuclear weapons exist. We're all living under threat of them being used, which is a pretty darn good point. This is kooky as it gets, this particular story. This is like, oh my God. This is actually what you think it is too, by the way. Atomic gardening tries to find a bright side, no pun intended, I suppose, of nuclear weapons. My God. This is one of the farms. I thought this was a gag originally. Nah, that can't be real. Ain't nobody that evil. We're talking about nuclear, Dana. Atomic gardens were often arranged in concentric circles with plants on the innermost row being closest to the source of the radiation, usually cobalt-60. Atomic gardening was a practice born out of the war for atoms for peace. Coming back to haunt us again, I notice. Tries to find alternatives, more positive uses for fission energy in the 1950s. They used to have radium suppositories and radioactive lipstick and glow-in-the-dark eyeshadow for the girls who all end up with holes in their faces. The practice known as gamma gardening explored the effects of radiation on botanical species and later tried to induce beneficial mutations. This is in 1950, when anything was possible. This is not one of them that should have been possible. Those exposed to the highest level of radiation at the center might be burnt or dead. But plants further back would exhibit changes. Invisible to the human eye as their DNA was altered and mutated. Hey, just like us from eating Fukushima food in Canada. These mutations might kill the plant or make it sterile. But it was also possible that they could introduce beneficial traits. Like Spider-Man and the Hulk, Dana. Mutations might kill the victims and make them sterile anyway. Not might, that's what is going on worldwide, right? By blasting plants with radiation, it was hoped that there would be more opportunity for harvesting the beneficial breed of mutation by speeding up the rate of mutations that were taking place. 1950 thinking now. This is Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone shit. Mutations occur in plants naturally, but introducing man-made anthropogenic radiation speeds up the process. That's a totally different process. You're using a completely different emitter than from the solar system, the elements from the solar system. It's the opposite of mutation. It's evil. It's actually evil to do this. Atomic gardens not only began to crop up across the globe, from the United States to Europe and India and Japan and in the UK, atomic activists Muriel Holworth established the Atomic Gardening Society in 1959. Whose goal was to encourage ordinary people to incorporate the practice into their gardening. How the hell did he ever get a hold of this stuff? A nuclear plant, or probably just a university. I want to have an atomic garden. We got your 6. We'll be right there. UK atomic gardening movement with Sarah dressed in a green, with a green and the screen behind her. Total coincidence. Armed with irradiated seeds, the task members were growing them at home and reporting back on the outcome in an effort to identify beneficially mutated plant strains. One success story saw Holworth become the proud owner of a 2-foot-tall peanut plant that produced unusually large peanuts. Right out of a science fiction horror movie, because a lot of this stuff is still out there today probably. The radioactive peanut plant was the result of a peanut seed being exposed to radiation with 17 times the amount needed to kill a human. Let me repeat that one. With 17 times more radiation you need to kill a human. Because you can't kill a human with potassium, right? With natural, harmless, stupid, everyday background radiation. So mutating plants, India has become really good at this, by the way. Not good in a good way, but good in an evil way. Good at being evil, let's put it that way. I think it's like that inbreed, like the children of the nuclear, their children from the inbreeding in the nuclear industry, their children inbreeding, and this current entitled generation are just the most dangerous creatures in the solar system. The Dispatch reported in 1959 its beneficial traits came from mutations that would take nature thousands of years to produce. Radiation did it in minutes. It's completely different though, see? And who knows what the effects will be on the DNA and the chromosomes from eating something like that, particularly regularly on top of that. And as for the atomic produce, it's quite possible you sampled some. The red Rio grapefruit was born out of atomic gardening, famous for its redder than red flesh. Unbelievable. So heartbreaking that these people exist. As public concerns surrounding radiation cancer grew, atomic vegetables were soon losing their popularity across the board. Long after the damage was done. Nuclear Science Museum is offering a fun camps this summer for pre-kindergarten to the Nuclear Science Museum is offering fun camps. Who the hell in their right mind would send their children off to one of these places? The National Museum of Nuclear Science and History. The nuclear industry there's no end to evil, eh? It's getting ready for a summer full of camps for kids to enjoy. The nuclear museums holding their sciences everywhere. That frightened the shit out of me when I read that today. From May the 31st to August the 5th, kids pre-kindergarten through 6th grade can enroll in one or all of the camps. We're talking about inbreeding. And there you have it. Americans fear nuclear war amid Russia-Ukraine conflict. How can you not, man? You haven't shut up. Russia's gonna nuke you. You're gonna get you. You better hide under that coffee table. You get off work, go home and hide under your coffee table. They're coming. The Ruskies are coming. Indy, Scotland could face a real test of his anti-war nuclear convictions. Yeah, perhaps the greatest fallout, no pun intended, from the Ukrainian crisis, regardless of the latter's eventual outcome, is the reappearance of nuclear weapons as a potential weapon of war. Vladimir Putin put his country's atomic forces on high alert at the end of February. Certainly a piece of diplomatic theater, but a chilling one. Because the local population doesn't understand what's going on, right? Nuclear sable rattling is a dangerous form of poker. But let's not give the despots in the Kremlin all the glories. After Putin's outbursts, France sent all 3 of its nuclear missile subs to sea simultaneously for the first time since the end of the Cold War. The nuclear industry has, they're the kids with the silver spoon in their mouths when they're born, right? The easiest way to swear allegiance to the nuclear industry is to say Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear accident. So if you ever go to a nuclear meetings and you want to get in, say, hey, world's worst nuclear accident is Chernobyl, right? Like, yeah, secret. That's like a secret handshake for the nuclear industry or something. The majority of the symposium participants will be from the nuclear scumbag industry. That's a bit of fun, isn't it? Nuclear industry is fighting back tonight, baby. It's so pathetic. The majority of the symposium participants will be from the degenerate nuclear industry. Attendees spanning departments of energy researchers to the heads of businesses and IT for some of the country's largest nuclear operations will gather to collaborate on how technology is being used to ensure the continued viability of the nuclear power. So the death cult was meeting to figure out how we can trick the population a bit better. Presenters from the nuclear organizations will share their first-hand experiences on the benefits and business justifications. Consultations around challenges facing nuclear medicine. The head of nuclear medicine, United Linkshires Hospital. Give us your child. They got cancer, have they? We'll sort it out. Treatment of diseases. They don't do it there, I don't think, though. I think they only do the light nuclear shit to you. Aging equipment. The problem with using aging equipment in nuclear is you can give people nasty doses. I don't know if that's the type of equipment we're talking about there. But here's my take on nuclear medicine. This is the quick version. The regular version takes about 2 hours of just this only kind of stuff. Introduction to radiation injury, another silent epidemic. Radiation-induced injuries to the visual pathway, you know, your eyeways, your eyeballs from radiation. So you go to get radiation therapy, and say you got a tumor here. buddy, guess what happens to the rest of your body? Cardiac injuries following treatment for breast cancer. Radiation-induced, of course. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Hypoxia from chronic radiation-induced lung injuries. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption. And central nervous system radiation injury. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Radiation-induced bowel injuries. Well, that sounds like a hoot. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Radiation injuries to the head and neck. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. A terrible way to die. Radiation-induced rectal injuries. Well, that sounds like a pooper. Radiation rectal injuries, radiation lung injuries, radiation-induced liver disease, radiation-induced bile duct injuries, language decline after, you guessed it, brain radiation therapy. How you can call this therapy goes, just haunts me every night when I try to sleep. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. What time's the coffee break, Dana? Radiation injury to growth plate. Radiation injury to the optic nerves. Radiation-induced insufficiency fracture of the femur 18 years after, radiation therapy. Like literally the worst thing you can get done to you is called radiation therapy. I showed you a cure earlier, by the way. It was called DCA. You can buy it on Amazon.com for a couple $100. Royal Marines practice taking on putting in the Arctic. Elite commandos stage a raiding mission from Navy nuclear power submarines in Norway. All the crazies are at the one time, I noticed. Nuclear medicine market latest innovations. I showed you them. They're killer innovations. Radiation exposure drug maker says it's ramping up supplies in Europe, putting this big dollar. Molten nuclear test veterans hope discovery of sensational new evidence will help win a fight for justice. This is a strange. United Kingdom. The Ministry of Defense, as usual, are being doorknobs. Moulton Douglas Hearn, 85 years old, bless his heart, has been at the forefront of the fight to prove that illness is experienced by veterans and their families caused by exposure to radiation following atomic bomb tests at Christmas Island and Australia and other places where the British done nuclear testing. Last week, their cause was furthered when a report was uncovered, dating back to 1988, that campaigners say demonstrate they've been saying for decades. And bless his heart for fighting, you know. The document was a companion report to an official study ordered by Margaret Thatcher's government and then disappeared. Campaigners say it shows veterans were 3.5 times more likely to suffer leukemia and other cancers. And that the Ministry of Defense does not accept this. And if they don't know, then Twilight Zone. But there are always new people in charge, right? Nuclear industry got that covered, obviously, now. The Ministry of Defense in the United Kingdom argues the 1988 data was available, despite campaigners not knowing about it until it was just published alongside a series of other reports. So the question was, why did the Ministry of Defense deny them for 70 years if they knew it existed? Because that's what they do. They're the Ministry of Defense. There's no such thing as a Ministry of Defense. There's a Ministry of Destruction, a Ministry of Sedition. He feels that the Ministry of Defense has been devious and that the link between illnesses and exposure may even have been known before the men flew out to go to Christmas Island. There's always been a suspicion, and I'm not just talking about hearsay. No, we covered this a few years ago. They sacrificed those soldiers and they wanted them from human guinea pigs because they needed data. That's why they were used in the context that they were used. That was on purpose. It was 100% on purpose. Mr. Hearn witnessed the thermonuclear explosions on top of that, after going to Christmas Island in the South Pacific. The Christmas Island, they call their babies jelly babies, but they don't even look like humans, right? Everybody's sick out there. You know, this is really amazing because they took these oases like Christmas Island, the Bikini Atolls and places like that. These wonderful, very, very rare oases, just amazing, beautiful paradise, actual paradises, and nuked the living shit out of them so that the Bikini Island right now is 1 million square kilometers of radiation. So they just destroy it. The most wonderful, isolated, and beautiful, untouched, natural, spectacular places on the entire friggin' planet. They went and just disappeared, atomized entire islands so you can play with stupid shit. The whole legacy is just stupid, 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 isn't it? I can't find a single facet of the 9,000 industries in nuclear that's cool. There's nobody cool in the entire industry. I can't think what sort of life I may have led without going to Christmas Island. No, indeed, I bet you can't. And that 7 generations of governments have covered up the truth. And ain't that a fact? And the Ministry of Defense denies, but they don't have any solid ground to stand on to deny. They just deny as a policy, but it's not, the evidence is so overwhelming. And so the evidence clearly shows that the Ministry of Defense is actually nothing but monsters. Nothing but hideous, soulless, spineless, gutless creatures. Horrific scumbags. Mr. Owen's father, James Ronald Owen, was involved at Operation Dominic, where the United States conducted tests in the Pacifics in 1962 and died in 1994. Having seen 24 detonations in 78 days. He added, I'm really pissed. I'm really pleased this is out now. Sorry. But it's frustrating. This has been sitting there all the time. We have lost thousands of people since '88. People fought for war pensions and were denied. Forget compensation, I just want some form of recognition, he said. To be the last country to get recognition is embarrassing. A Ministry of Defense spokesperson said it's not accurate to suggest a report that the information was not publicly available, as it was shared with anyone who wished to see it. You had to ask for it specifically. You had to know it existed in order to get access to it. Talk about book burning. Hey, that's what got him to sleep that night by saying that, I suppose. Certainly shows you that they don't deserve their medals. Book excerpt urges to violence. And that's, he knows lots about violence. That's Robert Latif, the retired from the U.S. Air Force. Flying high in the sky without a worry, dropping their bombs on their invisible targets. As a Major General in 2006, he retired. He's the adjunct professor at the University of Notre Dame because he willfully went and bombed poor people for corporations. Now he gets a job at the university to molest the children. What are the things that lead us so often to resort to force? How many suicide bombers does it take to equal your bombers, Robert? Drink maker using fruit for Chernobyl, lifting spirits with refugee donations. Ah, yes, that story. Drink maker. Drink maker. This is our old friend, Atomic Vodka from Chernobyl. We've covered him since this ever broke the news way back in the day. A company, that's stretching it, that created vodka from plants grown near Chernobyl, who said he was going to raise the money for the little villages to revitalize them in the nuclear wasteland, will donate the profits from the 2 new drinks to Ukrainian refugees. UK academics set up a distillery 2 years ago to prove the radiation-free spirits could be produced from the scene of, you guessed it, the worst nuclear accident in history. Right? So, if he's going to lie about calling Chernobyl the worst nuclear accident, what else is he going to lie about? What's the motive and the incentive for him to lie about that? Well, if we can grow stuff there, then it's okay from the stuff from Fukushima, right? That's the takeaway. Plus, it's actually, what he's doing there is that's actually evil to claim Chernobyl is the worst nuclear disaster in history. That shows you these are can't be trusted, that they're very dangerous people that will propagate dangerous lies like that. Now the proceeds from the lawyers, 2 new premium fruit schnapps drink, premium. The Chernobyl Spirit Company handed out thousands, but says 3/4 of the profit from the first 850 bottle batch of the 2 new drinks will go to Ukraine refugee appeal. So this professor, and there's a lot of professors out there, this professor there is making the vodka. See, when you think about professors, remember Harvard professor, Ivy League professor convicted in wife's death is free. He's from Pennsylvania, rather, which is 3 Mile Island territory. A Harvard medical psychiatrist was getting sex from the students. A law professor was also doing the same thing. A Harvard Medical School psychiatrist was having sex with his students for grades. Millionaire ex-MIT professor convicted of staging his own shooting. Former Harvard professor convicted of stealing $600,000 from a Hong Kong jewelry magnate. A Singapore law professor convicted of sex for grades. Another professor convicted of baby sex abuse. Another professor convicted of raping a 13-month-old baby. Another professor convicted of sex crimes. Another professor convicted of his wife's deaths. And a professor convicted of exposing himself to multiple women. So it's no surprise to see a professor with making nuclear vodka. Professor convicted of poisoning his wife. Professor convicted in child porn cases. And a professor convicted of torturing his wife. Child pornography charges. Chernobyl Spirit Company. Portsmouth University professor Jim Smith. That's him there. A despicable subhuman. Trash. Portsmouth University professor Jim Smith says the impact of war was worse than a nuclear reactor accident that covered the whole planet in radioactive fallout and changed the sex ratio of all the females and males in Europe. in all species, not just humans. Despicable people on our planet, man. It's usually professors and academics and doctors. There's some good ones out there, but not the ones that are showing up in the media, I can assure you. Not the pro-nuclear ones, that's for sure. There's nothing they won't do to get their way. There's no lie they won't tell. There's nothing they won't do. NATO warns Russia to stop nuclear saber rattling. NATO warns Russia and China. Let's settle down. We're NATO. So NATO's the aggressor. 30 militaries is what NATO is. Alliance. They've been around for 6 decades or something after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they're incredibly evil. What their legacy is just genocide, ecocide, omnicides. Russia must stop threatening the world with nuclear weapons. It's the Secretary General of NATO, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the Secretary General of Atomic Energy Agencies, the Secretary General of Walmart, the Secretary General of Douchebag Incorporation. They will never be victorious in a nuclear war, says NATO. That's why NATO shouldn't exist, because it's willing to stick its feet into stuff like this. Said he expects all 30 nations to attend Thursday's summit in a couple of days, which will focus on increasing aid to Ukraine and strengthening defenses against chemical and biological attacks. Strengthening defenses. Spending, spending, spending. We cannot take peace for granted, warned the warmonger. Stoltenberg refuses to go into specifics about how NATO nations are assisting Ukraine. Yeah, they're sending in weapons, like surface-to-air weapons, like Javelin missiles and Stinger shoulder launch tracking weapons for jet fighters and helicopters and tanks. He did warn Moscow that the alliance is ready to counter any threat and any attack. We face, and they're going to have a major NATO meeting on Thursday, really. I'll be watching that. Hopefully, it'll be streamed live on YouTube. We face a fundamentally changed security environment where authoritarian powers are increasingly prepared to use force to get their way. NATO is doing exactly that, aren't they? Opinion, how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb, because you can't write his own headline. Opinion columnist Zach Freeman describes why a nuclear war with Russia is a no-brainer. Let's get it on. That's what he says. As former Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, and honorary American patriot Henry Kissinger, which is one of his, Ted Kaczynski is one of his heroes too, by the way, wisely wrote in a report published by the Council of Foreign Relations, they should be arrested. The willingness to engage in nuclear war when necessary is part of the price of our freedom, said Henry Kissinger. The willingness to engage in nuclear war is part of our price of freedom. Nuclear war is part of the price of freedom. Somebody should dig him up and shoot him. It's time to pay the bill. War between Russia and Ukraine not only threatens America's freedoms and values, that they don't have, by the way, when facing a paranoid lunatic with the world's largest nuclear arsenal, we must fight nuclear hellfire with nuclear hellfire. Equally worthy of considering, in 1999, Prince said life is just a party Parties aren't meant to last. The Bulletin of Unconcerned Scientists has struck the doomsday clock at 100 seconds to midnight. That's the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists is the Manhattan Project. Scientists started that up. They're the definition of scumbags on top of that. All it needs is a little push of the hand. Already my underslept and over-caffeinated brain has begun to process the futile smashing of keys and dissent by those of lesser vision. According to News Nations, nearly 70% of Americans want a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Now, he knows why they can't have one. In questions clarifying that a no-fly zone could spark a war, the number in supports dropped to a still solid majority of 52%. Ultimately insinuating a no-fly zone means the Americans will shoot Russian planes down. Thankfully, University of Massachusetts Lowell has got us covered. Researchers posed the explicit choice of leave Ukraine airspace alone and risk greater civilian casualties. This was a study. Or establish a no-fly zone and risk a global nuclear war. Nearly half of those involved in the study picked the latter, saying yes to nuclear war. Nearly half. Nearly half didn't, right? One of the political scientists responsible for the poll, John, I'll butcher your name later remarked about this on his Twitter. Thank God for Twitter, innit? We told him it would take us to the apocalypse, and 46% of them went for it anyway. So if we have a no-fly zone, it'll take us to the apocalypse. Like, yeah, no-fly zone, let's do it. Let's do it, man. It's the right thing to do. TV told me. Demonstrated clearly, the majority of Americans, or at least the majority whose opinions matter, desperately crave atomic annihilations. ICBM's Apocalypse Made Easy. He said, I've referenced my personal hero, Ted Kaczynski. Zachary Freeman is an anthropology senior and opinion columnist for the battalion. Well, he's not an opinion columnist, right? Otherwise, they just hire anybody. They hire him because he have that opinion. And that's it. That's all I got. See, we got spammed pretty heavy, did we? There's the poll tool. Looks like we got spammed. Wow, look at that. They went Looney Tunes on us. Holy shit, eh? We've only seen that a couple of times. Like last night, because we had the same poll, but not as big as numbers. Can nuclear survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags? Well, somebody got triggered. It's hilarious. We're going to end the poll right there. %7% made the correct choice. 23% were probably fake accounts or people made a mistake, but nobody could believe that nuclear can exist without hundreds of thousands of scumbags. How the hell is that going to work? Yeah, good night, Stephen Young. Bless you, my friend. Thank you. Albert. Yeah, good night. Obsolete Optics. Michael Allport. Chuck. Chelsea. James Lusa. Hi, everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Where the hell did all that time go? Timber Traveler. Good night, everyone. Tree Fruit. Hi, everybody. Adrian Johnson. I'm going backwards tonight for a change. Splice it up and do it different for a change. Go up instead of down all the time. It's just when you come down, you get the comments in order. It's a more natural thing to do. Not that I'm reading the comments. I'm trying not to. It was a lot of work today, obviously, because we got the whole cycle of 24 hours of news. So that was a tough gig. Patrick, well, that's 3 kick-ass shows in a row, isn't it? I don't blame people, though, if they can't handle it. It does paint a pretty dismal picture of the nuclear industry when I go through all of this media, I don't cover all the stories I read. I read every story twice. The second time I do the screen captures, right? You read the story and you're like, okay, there's a bunch of lies. I'll cover that story. And then you got to read it the second time now to do it properly, right? Because otherwise you got all kinds of stuff all the time. Sometimes I'm grabbing it as I'm reading it the first way through. That's pretty rare, 10% of the time. That's more like habit when I'm just reading the news. Because I do a lot of that where I'll just read news for hours and hours and hours. I don't screen capture anything. I'll throw it into a folder and then bring it back up and start screen capturing later, right? It's Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Peaceware. I'm just doing a shout out to everybody. When the music plays, that means we're winding it down. Victor. Hi, Victor. Yourself. Thank you. I'm just winding it down. It's almost 1 a.m. in the morning here. Another long day for me working on projects. I'm pretty happy. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. We had around supper time it started snowing pretty heavy. It was around 6 inches out there when I came in the studio. Hopefully it's slowed down or stopped by now. Which kind of frigs up my plans for tomorrow, but that's I desperately need to just sit around for a day because I'll work myself to the ground because nobody else is going to do the work for me, unfortunately. It sucks to be me, man. I got to do all the work all the time. Anybody I missed, because I'm talking, not looking. And everybody watching this later, hugs for everybody. I hope you have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Dan in the sauna. I'm going to end the poll any moment. End the poll here. 65 votes, 77%. And looks like we got spammed in the yes vote, because that's not normal around here. We never get that many pro-nuclear around here. James, thank you, James. You're awesome, man. I definitely could use a few donations right now. We splurged for the last number of weeks on the tools. We finally got it all together. It's pretty amazing. I'll get some videos together for people so you can really appreciate what a big deal that was. Daryl Murray. Hi, Daryl. I missed you. And yeah, it's a dirty job, yeah. I don't really read the comments. I try not to because I'm scrolling, right? Timber Traveler, yeah, thank you again. A beautiful day in the neighborhood, just not this neighborhood. Adrian Johnson says, late spring, no flocks of geese out west. No, Jeffrey Brown is out there driving. He doesn't see anything on the highway, truck driving all the time. He reports in. It's almost like I don't want to go now because I've been going for so long. There's 3 shows in a row. We kicked the shit out of the nuclear industry. Pretty darn good. Actually awesome. It was an awesome beat in 3 shows in a row. It's hard to keep this pace up, though. We got 47 thumbs up, so you're awesome, folks. I'm censored heavily these last couple of videos, I notice. All day tomorrow will be censored. Yeah, we got everybody. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. See everybody. And tomorrow night. Dope. See everybody tomorrow night. I feel good now, though. We're almost 3 hours in, right? I feel like I should be stretching or something. God bless everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night for another Rock'em Sock'em Curb Stomp'em show. God bless you and your friends and your families and your loved ones and your pets and your community. We'll see everybody soon. Take care, folks.